in this first video, I want to start off by just taking a very quick look at the Ozone 6 app. So this is a new feature with Ozone 6. Previously, you would have had to use the Ozone plugin and mastered within a DAW or other host, but now we can just use the Ozone 6 app. And increasingly, I find I use this to master tracks from beginning to end. The reason why I can use this app without any other DAW is that it can host external plugins as well. So not only do we have to use the Ozone modules, we can use external plugins as well, VSTs or AUs. Now I want to start off my mastering chain here with Wave Center. And what I want to do with this is get the low frequencies out of the sides. So we've got our center channel and our sides channel here. This is mid and side. So basically this is everything that's in mono, everything's equal in both channels, and this is everything that's in stereo that's unequal in both channels. So if I turn the center down, you can hear there's a lot of bass, a lot of low frequencies in those sides, and we really don't want that. And with the plugin, I can push those low frequencies to the center and then they disappear out of the sides. And that is really important, especially in bass heavy dance music. You really need to keep those low frequencies in mono. It's very, very important. Now I've got a preset here which I've set to, that works quite nicely with this track, and what I'm doing is I'm pushing the low frequencies almost completely to the center. I'm pushing the high frequencies a little bit out to the sides to try and make it a bit wider. I'm pushing the punch, which is a transient kick, to the center. That should hopefully give the kick and the snare a little bit more push. But one interesting thing is what I ended up doing was turning down the center channel by 1.2 dB, and that should help to make everything a little bit wider. So when that's turned on, it's very subtle, but it's a bit wider, but it doesn't push the low frequencies out to the sides. That's what I really wanted to avoid. Now, before we move on to EQ, let's take a look at the waveform display above. And if we look at this, we can load in as many tracks as we want into the app. At the moment I've just got one loaded in there, and you'll notice that when I put my mouse cursor over it, we get these symbols at each end, and we can trim tracks like that, and we can also use this to do fades. And this is fantastic because it means that you can actually quite sophisticatedly compile albums or album style projects, and you can export masters that are finished and have all the necessary fades on them. They've been trimmed exactly to where you want them. So for me, that's really, really useful to have all that gathered up into the app. So let's move over to the Ozone modules here, and I want to start using the EQ. Now, if you take a look at the EQ here, it's probably quite familiar if you've used Ozone 4 or Ozone 5 before. We've got up to 8 bands available to us. We've got all of our necessary EQ shapes as well, and we've got 2 modes. We've got the analog mode and the digital mode, and they function a little bit differently, especially at the low end and the high end. Now I've got a preset here which I've already prepared, so we can have a look at what I'm doing. Now the main thing here to note is that I'm working in mid-side, MS. So not only have I done a bit of MS processing using center, I'm doing MS with the EQ. And again, with this kind of music, anything that's really bass heavy, I find it's very, very useful to process the mid and the sides separately. So if I solo the sides, so you can hear there's very little in there at some parts of the track when the beats are really going. We've kind of got effects, little bits of stereo vocals, stuff like that coming through. And if I click here, it will show us the curve for the sides. So you can see I've high passed very aggressively on this, just in case there's any nastiness left around. If we turn that off, yeah, in this section of the track we're not really getting any, but if we listen at the start, so there's still a bit there even after center. So I'm going to try and keep that nice and clean down in the bottom end. I've got a bit of a duck here. This is quite a sort of resonant, ringy part of the EQ spectrum. So I've done a bit of a cut here. And then I've done lots of brightening up. I mean, it's around about 4 dB for most of that, which is a fair amount. One thing you really need to remember is that in mastering, sometimes I find when I master tracks for people, they're surprised at how subtle the changes I'm making are. I think sometimes they expect to see you doing really wild EQ curves and things like that, and that's definitely not my experience. I tend to just go in and try to bring the track into focus. I'm trying to make the best I can of the track, not transform it. So let's take that solo off the side. Let's have a look at the mid, because we've got our beat is about to come in here, so this is a useful point to take a look at this. So I've done a very subtle high pass, quite low down, because this is very, very bassy, this track. See, there's some real low stuff. You can see all the way down the spectrum there, it's still very, very high. Normally on a lot of tracks, you would see it kind of naturally roll off, but this it doesn't. So I really felt we needed that, and it brings it into focus, it makes it a bit punchier. Then this here, so I'm holding down Alt there to do this solo on the frequencies, and that's very bassy. I mean, it's 80 Hertz, so it's about the same as a low E on a bass guitar, but it's got a lot of punch in it. Then I've got 2 cuts here because I found that these 2 areas were a bit resonant and I just needed to trim them off a little bit. And again, I've done a fair boost at the top end. So if you see this, it's not particularly crazy. There's nothing wild that I've done there. I am using the analog mode. It's the default mode and it tends to work really well for me. But I just think, you know, it's very important to bear in mind that a really good EQ curve for a master doesn't need to be extreme at all. You just need to listen to the track, listen to what's going on in it, and decide if there's anything you need to do. That is a crucial thing, because you may not need to EQ it. You don't always need to do anything in mastering. So at the moment, this is sounding pretty good to me. Now before I finish this first installment, let me just show you one last thing. Over in the auditioning section, we've got this little button with the ear symbol on it, which is lit up at the moment. And this is the effective gain setting for the bypass. And when that is lit up, if I bypass Ozone, it's going to add the same amount of gain as we are adding through the processing. So for example, if I was using the maximizer at the end of my mastering chain and I was adding 5 dB of gain, when I bypass with that effective gain control lit up, then it would pretty much add about 5 dB of gain when I hit the bypass, so that I can compare, I can truly A/B my mastered sound with my unmastered sound. It's really easy to be fooled when you hear something that's louder to think that's obviously better, and I think this is phenomenally useful. It's one of the things I like the best about this new version of Ozone. So I'm going to wind it up there for this video, but in the next video I'm going to start looking at the dynamics processing.